Hey guys, I just wanted to start out this podcast episode by giving you all a big shout out and thank you. I started this podcast when COVID happened back in, what was that, 2020? And it's been a good 3 years now, almost going on four since I've started this show. And I've had the opportunity to interview some of the top experts, athletes, entrepreneurs, coaches, literally in the world on this show. And it wouldn't be possible without all of you guys. So thank you so much for your continuous support. I have learned so much. And if you guys have been listening to the show for a long time, I know you guys have learned so much. And it's really just the best job ever to get to interview so many different people. Now, life has been a little bit crazy recently. I'm not going to lie. I have decided to launch my own business mastermind at the beginning of this year, the Evolved Evolution, or I have decided to launch my own business mastermind, the Evolution, the beginning of this year, which is something I've been wanting to do for so long because one of the things that I'm just so passionate about right now is helping people take their stories, take the things that they're passionate about, turn it outward, and being able to serve other people. And that's what I truly believe conscious entrepreneurship is all about. So it's helping other fitness, nutrition, and health coaches create the impact and the income and the freedom that they ultimately want for themselves. So, I started that in the beginning of this year. It's been incredible. We actually have our very first mastermind event here in Dallas, Texas on October 5th, which I'm stoked about. But on top of that, as an entrepreneur, I definitely have some loose screws in my head. I decided to launch my own functional medicine and functional nutrition certification. And I started working on that the beginning of this year. And I probably have put in well over 150 hours worth of content creation. Like this certification is going to be legit. It's going to help empower coaches to be able to do what we do in terms of functional nutrition, and then even help practitioners, registered dietitians, nurse practitioners, take a functional medicine and root cause approach using comprehensive lab testing. So, this is going to be a 6-month certification for both. We'll even have a life coaching aspect of it all. So, this is another thing that I've been working on. But I share all of this with you guys because one, you guys are in my life. You hear my stories every single week on this podcast. And something that I had to really shift in my life is transitioning this podcast to being just twice a month, which has been incredibly hard for me to do because I love these episodes. And I know for so many of you guys, you just wait for the next episode to come out so you can listen while you're working out in the gym, in the car, at home. So it'll be a little bit of a shift and change for a period of time, going to 2 times a month with just everything that I have going on. But the podcast is going to continue until 2024. My goal is to actually rebrand this entire podcast and bring to you guys a lot more solo episodes along with these interviews that I've been doing. So, if you do notice that there's some changes to the podcast with how many I'm releasing a month, this is why. But again, I appreciate all of your guys' support. I would not even keep this podcast going if it wasn't for all of the incredible feedback that I get from all of you guys. So, with that being said, I'm excited about today's guest. Her name is Paola, and she's a serial entrepreneur with a passion to develop technology that improves lives. And after a life altering motor vehicle accident, she experienced the power of neurofeedback and recognized how it not only helped her recover and heal from her PTSD, but it also enhanced her focus and brain performance and even helped deepen her meditation and relaxation. And in this podcast, me and Paula really dive into what neurofeedback is and how we can actually do it in our own home. We talk a bit about how having a hypervigilant nervous system can really affect every area of our life. It can put us in this constant state of fight or flight, and it can impact our relationships. It can impact our physical health, like our gut health. and how doing things like neurofeedback to help deepen our meditation to get the body into more of a alpha theta brainwave state can be very healing for the nervous system. Something that I always say is, you know, something I always say is the real flex is not only a healed gut, but also a balanced nervous system and a life you don't have to feel like you have to escape from. And that's what really today's episode is all about. It's about how we can use the power of meditation in the brain to really create the life that we want for ourselves. And Paola dives into this incredible technology that she created as a byproduct of her own healing journey, which is very similar to mine. I created Rachel Scheer Nutrition and got so into gut health through my own healing journey. So it's so cool to see other entrepreneurs who are doing the exact same things and now serving other people and making an impact. So I know you guys are going to get so much out of today's episode. This is Paola. I always love starting with everybody's story and really understanding the why behind what it is that they do. You know, I talk a lot on this podcast about the why behind for me getting into functional medicine and how I'm so into gut health. And I've had the awesome opportunity to interview so many people on the show and get to hear not only what they do in their business, but really their heart and what led them to that. And I always know it comes from their own personal story. And I even talk a lot about how I believe our evolution, even as conscious entrepreneurs, is really taking a lot of the things that we've walked through, doing a lot of the work to heal from that and turning it outward to help other people. And that's where real fulfillment comes from. So I'd love it if you could start with your story and what got you into creating it's Sensei, right?
That's right, Sensei. Yeah, I mean, I think it is an important question, the origin story for people, because what we choose to do with the majority of our time, which is how we spend our time, is mostly working, right, and creating something. It really has to come from an authentic place so that we don't end in burnout, right? Like that's just happening so much more and more. So for me, Sensei is very much. It's very heartfelt. It really comes from, I would say, turning around a very low point in my life, very much like what you've experienced. For myself, it was a motor vehicle accident, and it was about 7 years ago now. And it was, I was concussed. I had PTSD, and really it stopped me from being able to enjoy anything and stopped me from being able to perform in all the things that I thought were me, right? Like I am an entrepreneur, I am, an engineer, I am a mother, I'm a wife. And it really made me question, my identity, my worth, and I think, those moments in life are quite defining if you choose to make it that way, which I know you have. And so for me, I realized that even though I'd been a meditator for a really long time, I really wasn't able to tap into the level of mind I needed to in order to start healing myself. And I needed help to do that. And I looked for help everywhere, right? Like different people, different types of therapy. And
what were some of the symptoms you're experiencing after the car accident? How is that affecting your life?
Yeah. So, I mean, at the core of it, one of the reasons I couldn't heal, it was that PTSD I mentioned. It was hypervigilant. Yeah, it was this hypervigilant response. So I was stuck in this state of looking for threat, right? I was like, oh no, my neck, oh no, my back, like my body would spasm on anything. And as I had a 6-year-old boy at the time who was, happily playing around me, and now not able to, sneak up on mommy, right? Like careful with mommy. And that's pretty terrible, really, experience as a mother. I'm like, okay, no, I shouldn't be stuck here. How do I resolve this block? And so that was probably the worst of it. Simple things like socially, I couldn't go walk like, in a mall, like a village. Like I couldn't be around a
Mm.
lot of people if somebody would
Yeah.
bump me.
Like a lot of
Um,
anxiety, it
a lot
sounds
of
like.
anxiety. Yeah, body related. Like I didn't want to be bumped because my body was in so much pain.
Mm.
And then simple things we take for granted when we're healthy is going to an outdoor concert, which in the summertime is so lovely. And I couldn't do that. I was sensitive to light and sound. But even more drastic, it was about getting in the car, which is
Mm.
quite essential as an adult, right? Like I got to be able to travel a little bit farther. And that was difficult. So there were even moments where I was going to an appointment and I had to turn around, because I would get scared, right? So yeah, it was a low point for sure.
Were you sleeping okay at that time?
Oh yeah, definitely not.
No.
Yeah, I mean that's always yeah, another essential thing that now I've learned to guard very closely, right?
Mhm.
My sleep is like the fundamental like litmus test of, am I doing all right? Right.
Yeah.
So now like I use like the blue light blockers during the afternoons. I use red light glasses in the evening. I find that really helps as well. Make sure I'm not watching TV right before I go to bed, that sort of thing.
Mhm.
um and so yeah, I'm very cautious with my sleep. But yeah, so at that time, it was disrupting my life. And I was still running another tech startup at the time, and it was probably a good testament of where my life was out of balance, because I didn't stop. I should have
Mm.
stopped. And in hindsight, it's like so obvious, and it probably was to everyone around me. But I'm sure you can relate. It's like the drive of an entrepreneur,
Mhm.
it can be so strong, and it's hard to come to a self-awareness maturity to a point when you're like, okay, wait, I'm out of balance. Okay, maybe my drive isn't really what I need right now, and
Yeah.
I need some some other elements to come into the foreground.
Yeah. And I can
And so
imagine too, for, when your life's already being so affected, that it's even scarier to think about, stepping away from something like work. And so much entrepreneurs, myself, right? So much of our life is our work, as much as we like
yeah.
to say that it's not. I mean, it's a huge portion. So, I know that can seem very scary. And I love that you're talking about burnout, because I've gone through my own burnout before. I think all entrepreneurs go through their own level of burnout. And the listeners, even on this podcast, like, yes, there's some entrepreneurs, but there's also just a lot of people who struggle with chronic fatigue, who struggle with their own level of burnout, mamas who struggle with their mental health too. And it can come from so many different things. And what I'm really hearing you speak to is like there was this anxiety and probably, I would imagine, even depression. But your body even stuck in this like fight or flight state of just like chronic stress. And when we're in that hypervigilant nervous system, it really does impact every single area of our life. Like it's really at the core living in survival mode. And I think, for a lot of people, I was going to say women, but just like people in general, like if we look at the American population, is like most people are living in this survival mode. They're living in like a fight or flight state, right? It's because of the way we work, how we treat our bodies, zero margin, just like that constant to-do list that just only continues to get like longer and longer and longer. So, for everybody listening here, this extends far beyond, somebody who has maybe had like a brain injury or has been in a car accident like Paola has, but it's for anybody who's really in a state of burnout or feeling like this fatigue and like their mental health is suffering. So I just wanted to say that, but you can keep going and sharing
Absolutely.
your story, because I know what you've created as a byproduct of all of this is pretty powerful.
Yeah, I mean, and I think we're much more aware of burnout, just to touch on that, because now, with the pandemic, people were alone with their thoughts, right? And we're also starting to question, why am I getting up in the morning? Why am I spending my time doing this versus other things? And what's it all about, right? And I think it's healthy to some extent, but it's also just raise that sort of flag in our society is like, could we all be suffering from this? Is this really where we are as a society? And what can we do about it? Because it sounds like we need to do something about it. So so for myself, back to when I discovered neurotechnology, I was at that point where I was looking for help anywhere I could find it. Went through all the various alternative medicine routes, and of course traditional medicine. I have to say, I did, traditional medicine has its place. I did end up having neck surgery, so that couldn't have come in any other way. So that was great. I did that in the Mayo Clinic in the US, and it was really, really great and essential. But with the PTSD, it really was about that nervous system rebalancing. And so when I discovered neurotechnology, it was a revelation for me. And I had been meditating, but wasn't able to tap into those states that I needed to calm the nervous system when it was so overwhelmed by that previous experience with the motor vehicle accident. And so what I found was, with neurotechnology and with neurofeedback in particular, was that I could get the in touch with my inner state in a way that I was very interactive with it. And so neurofeedback for anyone who hasn't experienced that is really about reading the electrical activity of the brain, and then feeding it back to you in terms of audio and visual cues. So you're really having this immersive experience with your own state, with your own state of mind. And so, going a little bit deeper into that would be that there's different speeds of brain waves, as you would refer to them. And so, and each of them, let's say most of the time, we're operating at this level where my awareness is external, right? It's on you, Rachel, right? And I'm very much in a beta dominant state. They're all present, but beta is very dominant. And when I go a little bit deeper into, let's say, the ocean of the subconscious, I start seeing more alpha power in my brainwaves. And then that is much more of a relaxed, more almost spa-like feel. Like I think of it like, when I'm like doing hot, cold baths, and you kind of have that tingly body relaxation, right? Like that's alpha, right? And alpha is a beginning state of meditation, but it goes deeper, right? The ocean goes deeper. And it goes all the way into like delta waves, which are really, really slow. And that's when you're mostly asleep. It's very hard to stay awake during delta. But in between that, there's a theta state, which is often associated with creativity, almost like a dreamlike state. And it's also a very deep meditative state. But so all of those are not exclusive at all, but it gives you a taste of, how deep it goes, and that you can have not only measure, like I was saying, we can measure that brain activity, but we can actually have an experience at any one of those or mix of those states, and we can train that. And so in neurofeedback, if you're, having a very good, signal quality, assuming everything's right, and you're having, a visual and audio experience of your brain waves, and now you're interacting with it. So let's say you are able to bring in like a feeling of joy. And the feeling of joy, suddenly you see the gamma waves would amplify, right? Like it's a different state, and you can see the effect in a way that you can experience it audio and visually. And I think that's very powerful, because oftentimes when people are first starting to explore these deeper states of their nature, and they're trying meditative practices, folks often think, well, am I doing it right? and they're relying on an inner feedback of, am I doing it right? Or what they've heard
Mm-hmm.
from teachers tell them. And so this is about real-time feedback from your own biology, right?
That's
So there's some truth in it, right?
That's pretty fascinating. So people are wearing like this headset. I was checking out the website and they wear this headset and they go into a meditation and it gives them feedback, or how does that work?
Yeah, it's interesting. So when I first just discovered neurotech for myself, it was pulling me out of these states. So let's say the PTSD, for example, I went into a particular state that was alpha theta, which is really very hypnagogic. So
Mm.
it's a rewiring state. So the traditional things that you might do in like a talk therapy, right? Reliving the event,
Mm.
changing some of the story, right? Experiencing worst case scenario and then, rewriting it, that sort of stuff, that sort of psychology work. You could do that at an alpha theta in a very precise way. And then you are now in charge of that narrative
Mm.
and your experience of that memory. Right. So that was incredibly powerful for me. And outside of the medical realm, like that is really related to a lot of the inner work that people would do when they're just trying to remove blocks in their life for, living fully and achieving things in the world. Like sometimes we have these blocks. So that alpha theta state is very powerful. And that is something that is embedded in Sensei. And so what I wanted to do was to allow people the empowerment to do that, that sort of, let's say, block removal sort of work, but do it in a way that's very safe and at home, empowered on your own. And so to do that, we needed to build a system that unlocks over time so that safety is primary, right? It has to be first safety and efficacy. And now we can start exploring a little bit more freely, right?
Mm.
Because we did want to really make it available to more people, because right now it's in the domain of those that can afford those clinics, or those that hit rock bottom like myself and really couldn't afford those clinics but went anyway, right? And so we thought, how do we systematize this in a way that is safe and unlocking over time? And so the whole experience is gamified. So back to your question on how it works, it's an app. And it also has the set of headphones, the smart headphones.
Mm.
And so the headphones have all kinds of electronics embedded in it. And among those, the most important thing is the electrodes. And the electrodes are just sensors that are very sensitive and read the brainwaves. And so we've gone out of our way to design sensors that are really high fidelity. They're proprietary sensors. And so that we could actually go all the way from the slowest brainwaves all the way to the highest brainwaves, which are the gamma ones, and even to the third harmonic of gamma. So that's previously been a technical obstacle in being able to read those really cleanly. So that's the neurofeedback core. But then now when we're talking about meditation, we embedded meditation as a primer. So almost like it leads into the neurofeedback. So let's say, for example, that we were going to do a letting go meditation, right? We were going to do that sort of, if you can do it, maybe letting go with a forgiveness. So you can feel what you're trying to let go of. You can release it through the body with a meditation track. And that meditation primer comes along with neurostimulation. And so that neurostimulation, we do it in a very non-invasive way with something called transcranial photobiomodulation, which is just a fancy way of saying light stimulation. And so that whole arena is a really exciting area of research right now. And it's really about healthy cognition. And so that light penetrates the skull, energizes at a cellular sort of mitochondrial level, and, improves circulation. And we've found that we can actually change the frequency of that light and then give people a felt experience of different meditative states that they might not have been able to tap into as easily on their own. And so that we call the primer that leads into the neurofeedback, which is the heart of it, which is the brain training. So imagine if you've just done this forgiveness primer in this maybe, sort of theta like stimulation. And now you just go into neurofeedback and you're just in with your brain waves, right? You're just hearing them. You're hearing them like a symphony of sounds, but you're still, from a state perspective, you're in forgiveness. That's the state that you're in. You're not analyzing forgiveness, you're in forgiveness. And now you're just feeling into the symphony of your brainwaves. So that's sort of the encapsulation of what Sensei brings.
It's all super fascinating when you describe it, and that being even a technology that people can take and literally do in their own home. But I'm curious, this is something that you said really helped you in your journey after you were suffering with PTSD. How did the healing really come about for you? Like, what led you into like this realm in particular? Because I heard you say you tried a bunch of different things, right? You did Western medicine, you got some surgery, you tried alternative medicine. And then it sounds like there was like this period where you came across neurofeedback, and I'm assuming you got incredible results from it, but I'm curious as to how that unfolded.
Yeah, it's interesting. So my educational background is as an electrical engineer. So I tend to be a bit head heavy, right? So, and so I could tell that there was a level of mind I couldn't meditate deep enough to release my mind body connection was disrupted, and I couldn't tell my body the accident's over. It wouldn't listen to me. And I think that was, and I knew that if I, just from my previous experience, I knew if I could just tap into that meditative state, I know I could do it. I could tell it, it's okay, it's over. But I couldn't tap in. And so I went to, I did acupuncture and certainly physio, massage therapy, that sort of thing. But I also went to like theta healers. And so that concept of theta healing, I was like, yes, that's what I need. I need to go into theta. And as an electrical engineer, that made sense. As a meditator, that made sense. And I just realized that theta is actually a very precisely defined brainwave state that I don't think that the people who were trying to get me into that were really able to get me into. So it didn't work for me. Not to say it doesn't work for others, but I think if anybody had been measuring my brain while I was trying to do that with these practitioners, they would have said, you're not in theta. So now suddenly, the engineering me really likes the precision of, we're putting you into theta, and here's you can see it, and you're in theta. And I'm like, yes, that feels like something I don't usually feel. And I get that is a deep meditative feeling. And so the precision is really what drove me to it. They actually did something else, which was really appealed to me, which they said, oh, we understand that, you've meditated for some years. Can you do these various meditation styles? And so, contrary to popular opinion, and even my own at the time, there are different wave brain patterns for different meditation styles. And so, there's more of a focused attention meditation, right? So it's very single pointed focus, much more like Tibetan Buddhist style. There's more like a compassion, heart-centered meditation, very different brainwave pattern, much more like, so the first one might be more like alpha gamma. The heart-centered one's much more, compassion, gamma centered. And then there's more mindfulness style. So you more of a zoom out, right? You're more in the awareness, and open awareness is another word for that. And then there's also another one that's much more non-dual, right? And some people might talk about that like emptiness or transcendence. And so these meditation styles, they mapped them, they watched me do them, they recorded them, they showed them to me after. And that was my eureka moment. I was like, this is awesome. I love the precision, but I love that it's tapping into something that is sort of enigmatic, right? It's something that's somewhat untouchable, right? And so there was this nice, juxtaposition of precision, yet these undefined states that are hard to put into words too. And so in Sensei, we've actually included meditations, and just, we have 14 that we've defined based on our experience, based on research, et cetera. But they're mapped into these 4 sort of categories. Mm-hmm. And then they're also mapped to the various states of both the light stimulation and the training, the neurofeedback training.
I'm ready to try this. This sounds so cool. Especially like I'm super into biohacking and just like anything to help reach optimal health. And, I definitely meditate myself, but it's hard for sure. Like I find myself and I'm like, I was in a meditation, now I'm not, so I feel like trying something like that would be incredibly beneficial. And, I also know what it's like to suffer from a hypervigilant nervous system. So I can see how that could be so healing for a lot of people. Yeah, it's so cool to hear though, like an entrepreneurial type mindset, and then someone to go through their own like healing journey and then really bring the two together of like, okay, like this is really what we need. We need to measure the brain waves, and we need to help people be able to tap into this and gamify it, and like bringing, all of your backgrounds together. Like I just feel like that's like so awesome. And getting to hear people's story. That's like what it was for me, is I was like obsessed with nutrition and health, and I was in bodybuilding and fitness. And after I had all my gut issues, I just became obsessed with all things for nutrition, for gut health, yes, and functional medicine. And that's what led to my entire business. So it's like a true entrepreneurial mindset for sure in that.
Exactly. And I want to acknowledge that too, that there's the brain is just one organ. Right. I mean, you talk about gut health, super important organ as well, like, or mm-hmm. a system as well. And so we are very mindful of the fact that if we really want to help our community, this is one piece of the puzzle. Mm-hmm. And so we actually, we have a functional medicine doctor that's part of our team, Dr. Mark Atkinson. So we have a lot of respect for the functional medicine field. So that's why I'm really excited to talk with you. And so we are very much like forming a community around that as well, that Dr. Mark and actually Dr. Drew Pearson will also lead in helping people to do the other lifestyle enhancements that are required for optimal health, right? Mm-hmm. And optimal mental well-being, right? Mm-hmm. So we can't ignore the nutrition aspect, right? We can't ignore the exercise aspect, and how are you managing your circadian rhythm and all this sort of stuff. It's so critical. We can't look at the brain in isolation. So we're just acknowledging that, I think, is really important for people.
Yeah, for sure. And that's where I love having people like you on the podcast, because we can speak more specifically to healing the brain. And I speak a lot on mental health. And even when it comes to our clients who are dealing with chronic gut issues, one of the things I always say is the whole person must heal for the gut to function optimally. So it is never isolating these different areas, even isolating the gut. It's looking at the body as this interconnected system. And I can imagine too, for people who are even suffering with gut issues and a hypervigilant nervous system really playing a huge role in that, because we know the gut and the brain are very interconnected, that by balancing the nervous system, this would really improve a lot of the IBS issues, or even people with autoimmune conditions, because there is such a huge connection there. I mean, stress, I'm sure, the nervous system, it affects everything in the entire body. So I do think it's such a core focal point, and where so many people focus in on nutrition and these other areas, they can miss out 100% on really looking at the brain and looking at the nervous system, and even helping people heal from trauma too. And that's something that I really try to talk with my clients about. I don't go in there with them just because I'm not certified to necessarily do that, but I just know from a lot of my own work that I've done that led to my own hypervigilant nervous system, like that's such a core piece for anybody's healing and ability to reach optimal health. So, I'm a full believer in what you do, all encompassing with what I do with nutrition and lab testing, looking at what's off in the body, creating a customized plan, exercise, sleep, lifestyle changes. But, using different modalities like this are incredible, and they can be life-changing for so many people.
Yes, absolutely. And when you mention the nervous system, I'd be remiss not to mention we also look at the heart. And that was a learning, from actually Dr. Drew Pearson told me that he was putting helmets, like electrode helmets on monks, and their translator said, I know they were laughing, they were giggling, and he said to the translator, "Please apologize for me. I'm sorry for all the wires, and this must seem very strange." And he said, "Actually, that's not why they're laughing. They're laughing because you forgot the heart," right? Mm-hmm. And he's like, "I never forgot that again." And so he integrated heart into his practices, and mm-hmm. we've done the same with Sensei. So we have a pulse oximeter on the ear where we read the heart rate and train heart rate variability. Mm. And so we can see that we can train heart rate variability, which is amazing, but we can also train heart coherence, right, which is this mm-hmm. this state of harmony, really, with the mind and the body. And we know that it primes the nervous system and the brain for brain training. So we really encourage that and include it in the system as a primer for certain types of brain training, in particular for alpha. So it puts the brain into alpha when your heart gets into coherence, is what we can see. And so that's really interesting. But when you talk about the nervous system, and it makes me think that there's this internal safety that we need to cultivate in order to be able to do some of the harder work, right? That when we want to do deep meditative work and we want to do even like you talk about trauma release, or let's call it inner work, so even the smaller things, I want to forgive my neighbor for something, right? Mm-hmm. When we're going to do that, we need an internal sense of safety to be able to do that well, right? To be able to surrender into mm-hmm. that letting go experience. And so part of the gamification, and gamification is almost a bad term for it. Like, we worked with gamification experts, and we really, what we're doing is we've drawn the best from that field, because they learned so much in terms of the psychological elements of habit changes. Mm-hmm. But we're trying to use it to help people cultivate good habits. And we're trying to use the positive psychology elements of it. And so what we're doing is, in the beginning, is we're training the building blocks, which are inner safety. And the second one is controlled attention. Mm-hmm. And so we know, and there's ample studies, I mean, neurofeedback, and it has been shown to be able to cultivate those two things for decades. There's so much literature. And so that alone is quite life-changing for people. All right. We're right now, we're talking to a lot of new users. And so whenever people have used it for a certain amount of time, we have a meeting with them. We're trying to be, very customer focused organization, learn. And some of the testimonials are great. And some of them are just hilarious too, because they're just the relationship driven ones too, which are maybe the best litmus test really for your personal growth, and guys saying, my wife, it sees a difference in me, right? Like I'm having to say sorry a lot less, right? Things like that, right? And I'm listening better. I'm less annoyed. I'm in a better mood most of the time. So even at that stage of training the calm and focus programs, which is what we call them, that's already hugely transformational. But those building blocks unlock the next level, right? And so we're actually seeing, in early days already, we're seeing a lot of people have their sleep transformed, right? And they didn't expect it, and they didn't come to us for that, and they maybe didn't even acknowledge it as a problem for them before. Some guys are like, I was coming for peak performance, but my sleep is great, and I feel like I'm performing better. Surprise, surprise, right? So this is kind of the way it's gamified. It's meant to be fun, but it's so critical to first balance the nervous system and have safety in starting to explore.
Yeah, I actually read a quote when I was diving into a little bit of research about your company, and I saw that you guys had a quote that said, "The true measure of success is a calm nervous system." And I thought that was 100% true. And for anybody who's ever had a dysregulated nervous system, it's like you will do anything to get that fixed. It's one of the worst things in the world. But it reminded me of a quote I say very often. And I'll say the real flex is having a healed gut, balanced nervous system, and a life you don't have to constantly try to escape from. And really being able to love all of life. And it's both of these things. It's the nervous system, it's the gut, And when we can fix a lot of those things, it's like everything else really begins to fall into place. So I think it's just such a powerful topic. I know a question though that people are probably thinking is, how soon do I see results with using
Oh,
this?
that's great. That's a great question. I'll answer that. I want to go back to something you said. That I'll answer that first. So typically, if people were doing neurofeedback at a clinic, they say 20 to 40 sessions. That's the typical, that's the literature shows that. And when I say see results, I mean like measurable results in your speed of processing, in your reaction time, right? That those kinds of measurable results. And so how you take in information and how you respond to information. So that's something called event-related potentials. So that's a measurable objective measure. In terms of what we're seeing here, still early days, but I find we get emails and chats coming in when people are around the 10 session mark. Mm-hmm. And then that's when I get responses like that. It's like, my wife said, right? Like this is like, this is amazing. Thank you. And then that's what I'm finding is, especially when people have been doing like 10 sessions in a very, I would say disciplined way. Like they've been keeping pace. It's like daily or twice a day, or at least, sort of 5 times a week. Then they're really starting to see a change that's a subjective experiential change in their life. So, but part of my goal too is there's a lot of research around the inner calm and neurofeedback, a lot of research around training attention and neurofeedback. There's a lot of early stage research, in my opinion, on the meditative aspects, the creative insight aspects. And we have, clinicians on our team with a lot of experience, very privileged to have the advisors that I have, but a lot of that information is small sample size or anecdotal. And so part of what we want to do is to further the field. And so the community that we're building is, part of sharing that experience and helping us understand the mind better, right? Mm-hmm. So, I think we're going to see a lot of interesting trends in terms of what those impacts are at the 10 session mark. At the 30 session mark, maybe it's that plus other things. And ultimately, I really do believe it's about relationships, right? Like we're not trying to just increase your amplitude in, whatever band. We're trying to help you be more present with your friends, your family, be more connected with your work, etc. And so it is about the feedback from the people around you. I think that's where it will show. When I finished my first intensive with neurofeedback, my mom said to me, "You're different." And I said, "How?" And then she said, "I don't know. You just seem happier." And I was like, that's incredible. That's a really interesting way to put it. Right. Anyway, but one of the things you said was really interesting. You said, a life that we don't need to escape from. That was really cool because, part of this the broader context too here is, yes, we have the mind, yes, we have the nervous system, but then in the gut, but our minds are so much more than that, right? And we have this embodied awareness, and we support our minds support both awareness and the contents of awareness. Okay, if you'll go with me here, and so all day long there's new content of awareness, whether it's emotional or it's conceptual, or it's inner narrative, right? The stories we're telling ourselves about the experiences that we're having. And so what we get to do in meditations is we get to control that content for these moments, these sessions, these 15 minutes maybe, and we get to say my content is just compassion right now. Right. And so we actually get to touch and feel deeper into our true nature, which is that awareness, that pure awareness. Right. And so the hope of why we meditate, why we do neurofeedback with meditation, why we do any of this work at all, is because then in our day-to-day, in our lives, when things arise, right? Because we've both had, some bad experiences, and life will throw us curveballs, and all we can really control is our response, right? And so the intention is that with this training, this brain training, we're training our response into something that is more healthy, but also more connected with what we're experiencing, so that we're, something bad happens and we just go, no, 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 stop, 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 right? And that rejection, it builds the tension in our bodies, right? It makes us want to escape. It's the reason we reach for our drug of choice, alcohol or food or whatever it is. It could even be excessive exercise or excessive meditation, whatever, right? Whatever our thing is, but it's that escapism is the opposite of what we're trying to do, which is more of an opening to life, a flowing with life.
Yeah, a
right?
presence. You're present and you
exactly.
I can describe it because I've been in the escape side and feeling that, and I'm sure you have too, but it's like I actually want to be here and I'm fully present in the now versus, there's always like that. It's hard to describe, but yeah, it's like I don't want to be here. And it's like that inner tension of like, I want to, like I'm in survival mode. I can't wait until I'm done with this. So I can go and get into my safe place, which massively impacts relationships too, because you don't want to be around people. You're frustrated a lot. You're triggered a lot from other people, and you have like a negative like thought patterns often going, and you just like I want to go to a place where I feel quote unquote safe, which very often with people, it's isolation, right? That's like what you experienced. It's just like, I need to not be out. I need to not be around people. I need to go to my safe place where I can be isolated and alone, which I can control just this because it's not safe anywhere else. And it's anytime we try to go out into the world and live our life, all of the same tension and anxiety comes up of like, I don't want to be here. So I know I can only describe it from my experience and practicing meditation of it's just like, I'm just here. I'm here in my life and I want to be here in this moment that I'm in. And there's nowhere else I'm trying to be or get to. I'm fully here.
100%. That's beautifully said, actually. I'm glad that resonated. Yeah, I feel that as well. It's an aware presence. We need more people to feel that way, to come alive that way. And the people around us, our relationships, are so important to us feeling connected. And we know that now from the isolation we all experienced during COVID, and they feel it when we don't want to be there. It's like, oh, I'm worried about this other thing, or I'd rather be doing this other thing. People feel that, and it really hurts relationships. And then it makes us unhappy as well.
Yeah, it allows us to love more, really, truly at the core, which is what life is all about. So I know I'm going to give this a try. So I'll have to get my own and take my meditation to the next level, but also healing to the next level. I believe that we're never done healing. That's why it's healing. There's always just like other levels that we get to peel back, especially if you're somebody who likes growth. It's like, hey, guess what? You're going to be doing a lot of healing constantly because you're always putting yourself in new, scary situations, and your body's going to respond to that. And part of that is creating a new level of safety in different challenges that we're facing. So, and that's where a lot of fulfillment really lies too. So, where can people check out your company, Sensei, hear more about you and all of the awesome things that you're doing? And we'll definitely put the links in the show notes for people to purchase.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the company's name is spelled sens.ai. So sense.ai. And that is also the URL. So if you just check us out at sense.ai, you can catch us on chat, check out the blogs, and check out our science page. But if you have any questions, feel free to, message us on the chats and send us emails and that sort of thing. We're really in a very customer focused place right now. We really want to get feedback. What do people want to see? We have some surprises on the horizon, and around how we build more around relationships as well. But we're always very open to having these conversations.
Yeah, we'll make sure all of that is in the show notes. So if you guys want to check out Sensei, sens.ai. You can just go over to the show notes. And I've really enjoyed this conversation. Is there anything that I didn't ask you that you feel like would be beneficial for people to know about neurofeedback, sensei, or just anything?
Maybe just one thing, which is that really the objective of all of it is a flexible mind, right? So it's not about training one brain state or one type of meditation, or even just about the letting go or the inner calm. It's really about being able to empower individuals to know how to shift into these different states at will, so that in their lives they can call on it when they need to do whatever is required. So that's really what we're about.
Yes. It's almost like you get to step into the operating system yourself.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Well, I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. Hey, do me a favor. If you did, take a screenshot, share it in your stories, tag Sensei on Instagram, tag the Scheer Madness Podcast. And we always love to hear from you guys. So leave us some comments, some reviews. And this has been Scheer Madness.